gland as well, as does as is the case with growth hormone and with endorphins. But it is responsible for the production of mother's milk.
Okay, the lactin, the milk. Okay.
Right. It's involved in the production of milk when a mother nurses. Its function in humans, its functions in men isn't quite as well worked out as it is in females, but it seems involved in affiliative behavior and affiliative emotions in men.
Bonding?
Kind of bonding stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in terms of the levels of growth hormone, the levels of that hormone went up quite high as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was very interesting. Of this whole battery of blood tests that we drew, the only hormone that didn't go up were levels of melatonin from the pineal gland.
Oh, and melatonin is associated with sleep. How interesting.
Well, it's associated with sleep, but it's also, it can be increased by stress. I had performed a study a few years before the DMT one, in which we were measuring levels of melatonin in marathon runners in order to see if stress could increase levels of melatonin, and it did. So I at least was expecting a stress-related increase in levels of melatonin, but I also was thinking if there was any relationship between DMT and the pineal gland, then perhaps big doses of DMT would stimulate the pineal to make melatonin, but I turned out to be wrong. So the pineal gland is incredibly well protected from any kind of stress phenomena, as indicated by the results of our study, anyway.
Oh, how interesting! Huh. What else? What other insights about the pineal gland did you have?
Well, at least in terms of our study, the main pineal factor that we were looking at was just kind of the indirect reflection of its activity through the levels in the blood of melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed as if it didn't budge. So just in terms of sort of objective data to support my theory of a relationship between the DMT response and the pineal response, it came up empty, which was a humbling finding, as it were.
It's always paradoxical, I think, when you're getting close to something.
Well, I know. Of all the slews of hormones that I was studying, on the one I was really crossing my fingers about, that would increase was going to be the levels of melatonin. It was the only one that didn't move at all. So, it kind of had to make me evaluate some of my thinking about the pineal.
Brainwaves? Did you also monitor brainwave activity, alpha, theta, delta?
Well, yeah, in a couple of studies. Well, in a couple of volunteers we did, but it was an intrusive study. If you hook people up to an electroencephalograph, which is the machine which measures brainwaves.
The EEG?
Yeah, the EEG. It requires the gluing of all of these foul-smelling electrodes onto somebody's forehead and their scalp and all around their head. And it's a really strong-smelling glue. It's a really big machine, and it really intruded upon people's experiences. And I also performed a few brain scans on a few people, but it was the same sort of thing. The equipment was so loud and so intrusive and was so much a part of the experience that I didn't feel that...
Was that critical to alter the experiment to grab that data?
Yeah, I think it was really kind of cruel in a way to expose people to that level of technological intrusion during their vulnerable and kind of open state of mind, which results from these high doses of drugs. So,
did you get any results that were interesting in the few experiments that you grabbed that data?
No.
Okay.
We really just began those EEG and the brain scan studies, and they were pretty high tech and required a huge amount of statistical analytic work on those data. And you know, the first few folks didn't really result in much as far as brainwave changes or brain scan changes.
So this is not the avenue that you want to go.
No, it was kind of starting to treat people like large lab rats, and the experiences weren't going to be as important as the as the numerical data. And once that started happening, I wasn't that interested in those kinds of research studies.
And in rethinking the pineal, would you agree with the ancient assessment that this was just a key access point for mystical experiences?
Well, I still think it is. But, you know, in terms of real objective data supporting those theories, you know, we're still sort of at an early stage. We don't really have any definitive answers. But
do you have more experiments planned that have to do with the pineal gland? Are you going to go further in that direction?
Well, I kind of took a break from these studies around 6 or 7 years ago. I left New Mexico. I've just returned over the last couple of years or so. But yeah, I just have a straight psychiatry practice right now. I am sort of rethinking the idea of doing research, but I'm not currently involved with any, and I don't have any immediate plans.
By the way, I want to mention that we will do a second hour with Rick Strassman, part 2, and in there we'll give him a chance to tell us about his own thinking that maybe alien abductions have to do with the accidental release of DMT in your body. You're not there in the lab taking it through an injection or smoking on the street. What happens when someone has a near-death experience, like somebody that were cut of the same cloth says some doctors who study this, it's a very common thing. What happens when someone has an episode in a dream of an alien abduction? What happens when you meet an angel? Could it be that your own body's releasing some DMT to help you access that? Or we'll find out what Rick Strassman has to say about that coming up. His book, again, is DMT, The Spirit Molecule, a Doctor's Revolutionary Research into the Biology of Near-Death and Mystical Experiences. I'm Laura Lee. Welcome to Conversation for Exploration. Hi, I'm your host, Laura Lee. You ever wonder about the timing of mystical moments that happen spontaneously? They happen, I think, when our soul wants to speak to us directly through that language of symbol and experience. And what about these spiritual techniques that have been practiced for millennia? And how do they habituate or make a habit of going through that doorway, if indeed both of these experiences, the spontaneous and the practiced, make use of a compound that is found in our bodies naturally, in fact in the plant kingdom, as Rick Strassman has been telling us in the first hour of our conversation, and this is the second as we continue to talk about his work and his book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule, a doctor's revolutionary research into the biology of near-death and mystical experiences. Rick is back, and we continue to discuss what he found when he had volunteers take DMT and report some extraordinary experiences in a hallucinatory sense, going through a doorway, perhaps, and don't we do this naturally anyway with spontaneous mystical experiences? Welcome back, Rick.
Well, thanks, Laura.
You were reporting in the first hour about the kind of, altered state that people went to, out-of-body experiences that people were having when injected with the DMT in your experiments. What happens when we have these experiences naturally? Let's start there. What do you think is happening, and did you look to people's anecdotal reports and correlate them as well?
Well, I was actually most interested in DMT because of its existence in all of our bodies, and I was quite keen on seeing if administering DMT to normal volunteers might replicate the reports of